Good morning and welcome to Church at Home with Rachel for Thursday, the 10th of June. This morning, I'd like to talk a little bit about something that I'm going to refer to tongue in cheek as the need for us white men to get woke. That sounds awful. I know it does. But the reason I'm asking the question is because I think there's a lot happening in our society, and I don't think that everybody understands. And I think there might be a few assumptions about how much people know about what's happening in Canada, in the history of our country, and in what's happening today and what might happen in the future. I am fortunate because I am a white woman who is I've been here my family has been on this Turtle Island in Canada, as I refer to it, for at least 3 or 4 generations, at least. I have never known anything different. In my mind, this is my heritage. This is my country, my territory. It's where I come from. It is where I live and breathe. It's where I've been educated. It's where I've learned. It's where I teach. But I am also aware, maybe because I'm educated, but I think probably just because I have a modicum of ability to be astute to the people around me and pay attention, that I'm so not familiar with most of what other people in this place that we call Canada have gone through. I know what it is to be Rachel Walker Parker when I got married. I know what it is to be a 49-year-old white woman who has lived in Nova Scotia, Ontario, and now Alberta. So maybe I have a bit more experience than some others do, but I certainly don't have as much experience as I need. I'm asking the question, do we need to be woke? I really don't like that phrase. I find it not offensive, just really annoying. As an English major, it bothers me a lot. But anyway, it's a word that's out there. I think it comes from sort of a hip-hop background. But I think what essentially it's saying is we need to become aware. We need to wake up and be aware of what's happening in our country. I had a really good miniature back and forth yesterday with a young person, a young man who grew up in a small town in Ontario, and he is very important to me. I love him dearly. And he asked the question, is like all of this stuff that's happening, the 215 bodies found, the family killed in London, Ontario on Sunday night, is this all just, it seems coincidental? Is it just a, blame the white guys? Let's see here, how was it worded? Got to make sure everyone hates the white guys. You know what? He may have been being facetious, but I think he struck a nail on the head that we need to be aware of. We are really working, I hope we are, at becoming aware of, woke to the Indigenous plight right now. The idea that there are whole groups of people who predated us, pre-contact, who were here, their ancestors. I can think back, okay, my grandfather, my great-grandfather, I can't remember exactly which generation came to what is referred to as Turtle Island by the indigenous peoples of this land. But these are people who cannot, even with oral history, cannot go back far enough to remember or to think of a time when someone came here from somewhere else. There's no question. They're people from this land. We can't argue with that. And we shouldn't argue with that. But for years, for generations, since the doctrine of discovery and on, we white people, those of us who came from someplace else to call this place our new home, whatever generation ago that might have been, have not been aware of, for the most part, the real truth about the indigenous peoples of this land. We haven't paid attention to their way of life, their culture, their oral histories, the way they made decisions, the way they hoped for things, the way they took good stewardship of our world. As a matter of fact, if we look at our six baptismal promises, many of them that we hold in the Anglican tradition are things that are in the indigenous people held to be sacred without having been told about Jesus Christ. They had an innate sense and that stewardship of the land and stewardship of your kin and your neighbor was a part of who they were. It didn't need to be reaffirmed in some kind of a rite in a building with other people watching over and holding, are you going to do this? It just was a way of being. We, white people, have a lot to learn. We need to begin by listening and paying attention. And for people who are Indigenous and people who have been working in the church around the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and the calls to action, and lots of other folks around across the country who have been living in places where Indigenous concerns or Islamic concerns or other concerns are raised on a regular basis, and you watch the news and you pay attention to social media, then those are things that you're probably already a little bit woke to. But there is a massive population in this country that doesn't stay up every night to watch the news at 11 o'clock. And even at that, sometimes the news doesn't always tell the whole truth. They speak truth, but not the whole truth. That maybe their social media is not exposed to things that others are. I know that I have friends that I care deeply for who are friends on Facebook that I never see their posts because I see the posts of the same 20 or 30 people every day, which means that if you are a person who follows Twitter or Facebook or LinkedIn or one of the other social media platforms, and you don't have a natural ability or a natural access or exposure to other things like the plight of racism in our country, like the plight of the residential school survivors, things like that. If that's not something that you're easily exposed to, then it's quite possible that you don't know what's happening or the depth and scope of what is happening. And that doesn't mean that you should be shunned. It doesn't mean that we should start hating on white people or people who are privileged or people who are not like us, not like them, because they haven't made themselves aware. Awareness needs to come. We all need to get woke. We all need to wake up and smell the coffee to recognize the truth about what is happening. But that takes place on several different levels. Education. If our schools, the very places where we teach our children how to think critically or not, if we don't expose them to these ideas and things at our schools, how do we expect them to learn? We can't expect their parents to teach them if they haven't been taught either. I think there's a real concern that I'm having. Just maybe I'm wrong, I hope I am, but I'm concerned that with all of this awareness, like watching the news at night when a lot of it has shifted from COVID to the residential school in Kamloops, and now what's happening in London, Ontario, and now Islamophobia is at the forefront, and I'm a little bit scared that we will focus so much on these things that people who do not understand, people who have not yet been exposed to these things, will start to feel persecuted themselves. Gotta blame the white guys. That's not what we're doing. It's not what we should be doing anyway. But what it does mean is that we have people who haven't done anything wrong, who, if they have, we all participate to some extent in systemic racism, they may not understand that, because if it's systemic, it's built right in. We're not taught to challenge that. And this is a brand new thing for a lot of people. This The idea of residential schools is new to whole generations of young people who have not been taught this, and even their parents who, if they weren't involved with the church and they didn't check into the news on a regular basis, 5, 6, 7, 10 years ago, they may not be aware at all. So before we start blaming them or creating a culture that cancels them, the white guy, or a culture that tells them that they are hateful because they haven't made themselves aware, we need to be careful that we don't go to the opposite extreme. Over here, the pendulum swung, and we, with the doctrine of discovery and everything that we've done with our systems, our systemic racism, we killed people. And we killed those who survived. We killed their souls. We killed their psyches. We made them feel like they were less than. And that has trickled down and continues to impact their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. And it's not okay. We have to stop that. We have to fix that. But we don't want the pendulum to swing so far that those people who are the generations after the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren of those who persecuted and hurt the indigenous people, we don't want them to become hurt themselves. That would completely defeat the purpose, I think, of trying to find reconciliation, of trying to teach truth. We need to teach truth to all of our Canadian citizens, whether they have been here for generations beyond imagination, or whether they just came to our shores as immigrants. We need to teach truth, but with that we need to teach tolerance. And we need to teach not just tolerance, we need to teach people what it is to be open and generous and kind and loving to your neighbor. White guys should not feel like they are being persecuted because they don't understand. We need to educate. And if once education has been shared, once truth has been acknowledged, then if they still choose to hate, we deal with that. We can't allow our young people who are not Indigenous, who are not Muslim, who are not of a different ethnic group, creed, or color, to believe that they are less than because their great-grandparents thought they were better than. We can't do that. We have to find a balance. We have to find a way to teach and educate and accept one another and what has happened so that we don't make it happen again, that we don't let it happen again. So us white guys need to get woke, but everybody else needs to be patient with us as we do. I think I'll probably talk more on this topic tomorrow. Have a great day. God bless you. Be safe, wear your mask, and I'll see you again tomorrow for Friday's Church at Home with Rachel.